All right, we're ready to begin. Welcome all. Thanks for joining online and all the people in person today. Um, we have one. But this is the third stakeholder meeting for the residential solar standard offer. Let's see if I can get this thing to advance today. All right, so as with all Austin Energy meetings, we try to start with a safety moment. Today's safety moment is on hurricane safety. So hurricane season is between June 1st and November 30th. So now, significant hurricanes hit Texas about every 7 years. Hurricane Hanna was 2020, Nicholas 21. Those are the last major storms to hit. But these were only noted as Category 1. So not as significant as, say, Harvey, which is, namesake hurricane. For me, I get a lot of notoriety out of that one. But yeah, so, some of the ways to stay safe during a hurricane is make a plan. So contact lists, everybody has numbers in their phone, but most people don't memorize numbers anymore. Might want to write them down. Meeting points, travel routes, build a kit. So have a supply kit ready. Make sure you pack enough stuff for your pets. Monitor local weather, and we've provided a couple of handy links here to do that. Secure your property if you are vacating. A lot of times when neighborhoods are evacuated, then, some people can come in and prey on that. Heed the guidance of state and local officials, and evacuate if you feel you're in danger or if you're prompted. Take photos of important documents and items, or if you can, take them with you from your home. Having gas and a spare tire, things like that. Make sure that if you have to evacuate, you can do so safely, and share your evacuation plan and emergency or with your emergency contacts. So that was safety moment. All right. I wish this thing. So going over the agenda today, first we're going to do a review of commercial standard offer. We just want to make sure that everybody understands the concepts of the standard offer. We're going to go over the Solar for All program a little bit because there is some overlap between the residential standard offer potential approach and Solar for All. And then we're going to kind of dive into the residential standard offer. So the commercial standard. And now, okay. So the commercial standard offer program is designed as an intake process for commercial customer-sided, third-party owned community solar generation, and a rate to go with that. Eligible system owners receive the standard offer rider for all of the solar generation that they produce in our load zone. The standard offer program was initiated as part of the 2022 base rate case and part of the settlement agreement on that. And we held a grand total of 7 stakeholder meetings to get there. So what the standard offer rate is a key part of the commercial standard offer. The standard offer rate is very similar to the value of solar rate in that it includes components of avoided costs that are produced by solar. So we take those components, energy, ancillary services, and transmission, we stack those values up, and then that becomes part of the determinant of the actual rate. And I'll go through that in a little more detail on the next slide. But just to kind of go over those components, the first and foremost is ERCOT energy savings. So when a kilowatt hour is produced within our service territory and behind our load zone, that's a kilowatt hour that we don't have to buy off the ERCOT market. So any consumption that is not met by local production has to be purchased off of the ERCOT market. So Austin Energy has generation all over. We have some that's in our load zone, and we have utility scale solar and wind and natural gas and other generation sources outside of our load zone. So when it's outside, we pay, or we get the load zone price to inject that energy into the market, and then we pay our load zone price to buy that off the market. Our load zone price is largely determined by supply and demand within our load zone. So if we have low supply and our supply in our load zone is lower now because we fairly recently retired 700 megawatts of gas-fired generation in our load zone. So the supply's down, load keeps growing, and so we have it's pretty disparate right now. So that sometimes will put Austin out of the market, let's say. So like the rest of the ERCOT market, or the majority of the ERCOT market might be paying like middle market prices, but we're paying higher prices than that because we just don't have enough generation in our load zone to, bring that down to where other people are at. So this is part of the reason why we have these efforts. We want to have more generation within our load zone. We want to, ultimately have some flexible loads and flexible generation. So co-locating with batteries is good and helps us. But to determine the ERCOT energy savings, we're looking at the PV production curve and how that aligns with the ERCOT market prices. And that's how, and so we look at that over a year, and then we average it out to be a cost per kilowatt, or a price per kilowatt hour, I should say. So that's the energy savings. Ancillary services, so that's the weighted average cost to ensure that the right number of power generation sources are running to balance the load and generation on the ERCOT grid. So we have ancillary service requirements. Solar helps to meet those. There's a value there. We break that down into kilowatt hours, just like we do energy. And then transmission. So any generation that's less than a megawatt will help to produce transmission savings for Austin by essentially reducing our overarching load. And so our transmission costs are based on 4CP, and 4CP are the highest usage days on the ERCOT market for the 4 summer months. And so one day in each month, the peak day during a 15-minute window is 4CP, is one of the 4CPs. And so to the extent that solar reduces that our load requirement during that 15-minute window, there's a value created there. So we assess that and we assign that value to any projects that are less than a megawatt. If it's over a megawatt, then that generation gets added back into our load zone, and we don't get to count it as conservation. It gets added back onto our load. So it doesn't effectively produce transmission savings. I guess I'll pause there, and if anyone has any questions about what I just covered here, let's take those now. So I'll give you a second. David.
I think I heard something about potentially changing the 4CP equation as part of the recent proposed legislation or something. Did I hear that right? Or?
They often propose to change this. They think about 12 CP because our winter peaks are starting to rise and be more significant. But as far as I know, it's still 4 CP. They haven't changed anything yet.
By that you mean the ERCOT or the
ERCOT.
PUC?
Right. So, there are often proposals on the table, but really until they adopt them, they're just proposals. So, you definitely want to pay attention to that. But, again, there's always a proposal on the table. So, and so here you'll see that we show what all these numbers are for 21, 22, and 23. And this is the first time we're presenting 24. So these are the latest numbers for FY24. And you will notice that they went down considerably. The energy value is almost a third of what it was in 23. T costs relatively the same, ancillary services less than half. And overall, it's less than half of what it was in 2023. That's because we had a really mild year in 2024. So there weren't extreme weather events that caused the market prices to spike. There weren't lapses in generation or generation scarcity that caused the market to spike. And when the market spikes, and if solar is producing, then that's when it drives up the value of solar. But if the market is relatively tame and the weather is not affecting it, then and planning is really good, then that brings these prices down. So you can see this kind of volatility of the value of solar. We had a similar year in 2021, but note that 2021 was a base rate case year and they normalized it and took out Winter Storm Uri for that year. So it looks relatively low. 22 and 23 were both hot years. We had scarcity in both of those years, and we saw market prices go up pretty high on different occasions. So that's what it is. That the 2024 numbers will be factored in to the next standard offer rate, which will be adjusted in 2026. And it will also reflect 2025, which has not been calculated yet because we're not through with this year. But once we are at the end of the fiscal year, we'll calculate that. We'll put out the number as soon as we can. And then in March of 2026, that number will adjust. So just for those who also have customers that get the value of solar rate, this graph does not include societal benefits on here, which is another layer to the value stack. So the standard offer doesn't include societal benefits, so that's what this is. Over here on the right is the current the current standard offer pricing. And it reflects the average of those first 3 years, 21, 22, and 23. Okay, any other questions about this slide?
So currently the 2026 trend at 11.24 is the average of 21, 22, 23, which is I think what you just said. Isn't it? Wouldn't it be accurate to adjust?
Yeah, we could. Because this is new, I didn't adjust all that, and those are actually reflecting the actual standard offer price right now. But if you wanted to, and next time, I'm sorry, I apologize. I will update that to be the average of those 4. And then when we do change it in March of 2026, it will reflect all 5.
It appears we've lost connection to the internet, just so you're aware.
Oh.
I lost mine too, so I don't know what happened. Somebody had their hand up though. but
That's crazy. Never seen that happen.
This happened a couple weeks ago.
What was your phone doing, Heidi?
I can still hear you online.
Oh, there we
Still
are.
hear us?
Okay, looks like we
Okay.
reconnected.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you unmuted online, can you remute?
I'm looking for him.
And someone had a question online. Would you mind go ahead and going off mute and asking your question? No? Okay.
Sorry, I don't know if anybody's aware over there, but we currently can't hear you guys.
Nah, still cannot hear or see.
Or especially if you don't have enough generation to meet load and you're having to bring on the peakers, right? So peakers come on at a higher price, and they only come on when the market price reflects that. So they'll start raising the market price to kind of signal new generation sources to come online. And they'll continue to raise that price. It could go from where it normally sits around 35 to $40 a megawatt hour. It can go up to $9,000 or $5,000 a megawatt hour.
It's picked up on.
So
Interesting.
a lot more. And when
Because I have it on
happens,
computer.
if solar is producing, it's super valuable during. Make sense? Are we gonna?
Just trying to put it back on. They can hear you now through my computer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're saying they can hear you, they just can't see any slides. which
Okay.
makes sense.
Okay, yeah, we're getting to the slides.
Michael, we'll try that again, see if it goes, but,
There we
There's a
go. We got him
comment,
back.
though, From George.
okay. I mean,
to the
Okay.
effect of there was a huge increase in battery storage in 23, 24, which probably tended to reduce the peak highs.
Yep.
Does that mean something to you specifically?
Yeah. So, yeah, but batteries can deploy.
Well, let the people in the meeting know that you're here.
Okay. Batteries, okay. Check. Okay.
Check.
You know, batteries, when batteries are, putting out power, they look like generation, right? And then later, they become a load because they have to recharge. So, you can kind of effectively use that battery to smooth out the peaks and valleys of load on the market and generation on the market. So is everybody able to see and hear me again? Can I get a thumbs up from somebody? No?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. And I see we have a hand.
They may have been doing thumbs up, see if they took them down. Yeah.
Okay,
Lots of thumbs up.
all right, good to go. Okay. Any more questions on this slide? Okay. Now I just gotta. Nothing's working to advance this slide. Oh, there we go.
No.
Okay. So, the standard offer feeds in to the community solar program. The community solar program currently, without any standard offer projects as part of the portfolio, consists of fixed priced portfolio. So in other words, we've negotiated power purchase agreements to be a fixed price for an extended period of time. And so the program has been designed around that, where a low-income customer started off paying nothing because they were subsidized by $0.015. And the market rate customer paid $0.015 to start with. And then we locked in those prices in 2018, 2019. And so for all of those customers that have those locked in prices, they've not been subject to PSA increases. Well, during 22 and 23, we had to go through some significant PSA increases. And so at the moment, all community solar customers are paying less than everybody else. So while at the beginning, the market rate customers paid $0.015 more than everybody else, now they pay less than everybody else, and they'll end up most likely hedging over time and coming out as benefiting. So that's kind of the concept when you have fixed pricing for your portfolio. But now with the standard offer, it varies, and it varies with our avoided costs. So it's not creating any kind of a hedge or cost benefit over time. So we're going to have to adjust the offering for community solar to reflect that. And the most likely solution that we'll probably end up with there, and we will have some community solar stakeholder meetings about this, but we're probably going to end up having a floating premium, meaning that when you participate as a market rate customer, you're going to pay a premium. It might not be $0.015, but it's going to be something to reflect our portfolio costs, and then and the cost of the program. And then the low-income customers may get a fixed discount there. We don't know yet. We have to figure that out. Or maybe we take that penny or that premium from the community solar, the new community solar portfolio and group of participants, and put it back into the residential standard offer program to help to adjust and balance out the program to make it just, more attractive to developers and customers. So right now, we've got 10 projects that are encumbered, meaning that they've met a certain level of criteria to get to that stage. They're very close to being able to pull those permits and start development. We have another 25 projects that are in the process of getting encumbrance. We're seeing projects anywhere between 750 kilowatts to 358 kilowatts, or other way around, 358 to 715. with the average of just over 0.5 megawatt in size. And so we have 24 registered contractors and 6 that are pending. So this is a really good start to the standard offer program. It's a testament of its effectiveness. And I've heard through the grapevine that there are more projects coming through. So that's also good. I would say, you know, and you can see here, these projects have economies of scale. Okay, so economies of scale and solar are very real. A 5 kilowatt system is going to be far less economic than a 500 kilowatt system. You know, you're talking about, you know, $4 a watt as opposed to $1.50 a watt or something like that. So it's very real and it means a lot. And so it's going to be one of the challenges for residential standard offer is the affordability.
How many contractors are represented in the projects that have been submitted?
Can you answer that? Is it like 2 or 3?
2 or 3.
Yeah.
Is it 2 or is it 3?
Is it 2 or is it 3?
It's 2, and then
Okay.
we have a few that are not fully submitted yet, so.
Okay, thank you.
I've got 2 questions online. One is from George asking, when do you expect the first project to come online?
That's hard to say.
Okay. And then Scott would like to know, back to the solar standard offered pricing sheet, the avoided cost components add up to 0.0641, but the total is less than 1 megawatt line. It says 661. I'm assuming there's some confusion on the numbers on that slide.
Right. So the less than a megawatt is 6.61 cents. And over a megawatt is 3.6 cents. And that's because when it's over a megawatt, we can't include the transmission cost savings. Did that answer the question?
I'm asking him right now.
You can come off mute if you want to just talk.
He's saying they don't add up. Can you come off mute, Scott?
you're right.
That's all. Just the 3 is 6, and then the 3 and it doesn't add up.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at that. Maybe
It's just, I think it's
transposed
just
numbers.
the 0.02 is somehow added, but just making sure it should be 641 instead of 661.
Yeah, let me double check these numbers and we'll send out an updated slide deck after the meeting. Thanks for pointing that out.
Thanks.
Aubrey asked about the contractors. How many contractors are represented in the encumbered projects?
2.
It is 2. Okay.
Hey, can you go back to that slide with the solar panel on it? Next one. You were saying that there's economies of scale. Question is, how do we get a solar panel that big? Go to the next one.
This one?
No, the one where it has all the contractors on it and the solar panel picture.
That one?
Yeah, I think that panel's huge. How do we get one of those?
Yes. Yeah, I've never seen it done like that. Looks like they've made an array and then they're hoisting the whole array up.
Yes, that's exactly what I said. Your AI guy.
This is a 5,000 watt panel. Yeah, I don't know. Why don't you research that, come back to us.
You make them, don't you?
Yeah. All right, so the Solar for All grant. I want to go over this because I think there are some similarities here and definitely some synergies that we can get from the Solar for All activities and proposal. So here we go. The Solar for All grant is a grant from the EPA. We went after this grant through a coalition of other cities and areas within Texas. So we formed a Texas coalition to approach this grant. We received $250 million for the state of Texas, of which Austin Energy gets approximately $32 million. With the $32 million, we plan to do a number of things. First is to create a workforce development program. So we're working with what's CDD, Micah?
Economic development.
Economic Development Department, who is working on a path through which participating workforce can get upskilled. They have wraparound services, so they will, help to provide transportation and daycare if needed. And they really, do the whole gambit to help the workforce develop and move up. And this will be solar focused. Hopefully, this workforce then comes to help to build the projects that are going in through the Solar for All grant. So we're creating equitable access to solar. All of these solar projects will be in disadvantaged communities. And so, we're trying to reach the low-income customers out there. They will create resilience benefits. So the idea is that we put solar and batteries on about 2,500 residential homes. The solar will feed those batteries during a power outage and provide resiliency to the home. So if the whole grid goes down, their power will stay on. Having, one home on a block with resiliency helps the whole block. It's a community approach. Then we are through the portfolio of solar, which is similar to the way a residential solar standard offer program would work. All of that solar generation is going into a community solar portfolio. Solar for All will have its own designated community solar portfolio through which we'll provide qualified low-income customers a 20% discount on their utility bill for 15 years. Then at the end of the 15-year period, the ownership of the systems will flip to the homeowner. So they will then become just a normal solar customer with a battery. They'll get the value of solar rate for their production. They'll be able to use their battery in a battery program, assuming that we have one at that time. And so they'll become the owners of those systems at no cost to them. And then, of course, this is creating environmental benefits to boot, and that's the underlying objective of the whole program. So how does that, well, I'll get to in a minute, how that relates to the residential standard offers, but just a little bit of background on what we've done to date. We've had a couple previous residential solar standard offer stakeholder meetings. We had a one-off meeting that we called the Financial Focus Group. And thanks to y'all who attended that, I think we got down into a little bit more nitty-gritty detail about, what it would take to make this program successful. I'll get into that in a minute. We developed a survey that will go out later this week. And, we're trying to glean from some information from our customers about, what their interests are, how they could potentially be interested in this program. And then, of course, today's meeting, and that's the time on there is wrong, but that's okay. The goal is to have a final determination to identify viability and the approach by the end of this fiscal year, which is in September, the end of September, and a potential program launch in FY26. So what did we figure out in the financial focus group? Well, some of the key takeaways is that the residential solar standard offer program, based on the current solar standard offer program design, just wouldn't work. So like if we were just to say, open up commercial solar standard offer to residential, it probably wouldn't be enough because you don't get the economies of scale with residential. You can do aggregation, but you're still having to deploy at multiple sites. And so it's kind of a limited economy of scale if you're aggregating residential customers. But we discussed that, and you know, to get closer to making it tangible, likely would have to do some kind of aggregation on the developer side to make that pencil out. Battery inclusion and Austin Energy assistance in customer acquisition could lower the price point. So we're not there yet, but we are gearing up to study batteries and the avoided costs that can be produced by batteries. We know that that's locational. We know that that depends on how the batteries are operated. And so we want to identify what are those values, how can we maximize those operational profiles to then maximize the avoided costs so that we can pass those through to increase the adoption of batteries in our service territory. And hopefully we can pair the two programs so that they work together. You have a battery program that can stand alone. You have a residential standard offer that could potentially stand alone, or they can work together. So that's kind of what we're envisioning. Another thing is for Austin Energy to assist in customer acquisition. So, you know, Austin Energy is a brand name that people know. And we do have marketing power at Austin Energy. So, you know, the idea is that Austin Energy could potentially use our marketing power to help lower the developer's customer acquisition costs and thus make this more viable. Some of the actions that we discussed are to deploy a survey, which we are doing at the end of this week. Continue to resolve the following questions. Will the program be in front of or behind the meter? I think we're getting closer to that answer, and I think that we can do this for residential behind the meter. So, and that's thanks to the efforts of the Solar for All grant. So this is how these two programs have synergies. We can figure things out here. So that's one big hurdle. There's going to have to be a lot of you know, caveats there and protections on our side, but we think we can do that. How will Austin Energy's battery program be designed? To be determined. But you know, we know that the first step is for us to get that information, right? Again, how do we operate the batteries to achieve the highest avoided cost? So, you know, one way you can do that is to operate it to kind of enhance the ability of to leverage the avoided costs that we already talked about, the energy, the ancillary services, the transmission cost benefits. But there are other avoided costs out there potentially as well. So capital investment on the distribution grid, for example. You could potentially, say you have a feeder that is experiencing load growth and it's at the edge of needing to have you know, more equipment added so that it can serve the load, a new substation, let's say. If you can target the batteries and solar to that feeder and then operate that to reduce the demand of the feeder, then you could potentially you know, defer or eliminate the need for a new substation. So that's, even if you're putting off that substation for a few years, that is money, that's value. And so we want to look at these different approaches to utilizing batteries to maximize their potential avoided cost benefit.
There's a question from James. Any comment on potential for AE to participate in the ERCOT aggregated DER pilot program?
We could participate in that program. However, it is more limited than Austin Energy is in terms of being able to capture avoided costs and benefits. So, Austin Energy is vertically integrated in that we have generation and load, and transmission. So we're load serving entity, we are transmission entity and generation entity at the same time. Most, other utilities can't do that unless they've opted out of deregulation. So only like municipalities and some co-ops can do that, and we can do that. And so we can actually leverage more benefit than you could through ADER.
I have a question. So sorry, I couldn't make it to the finance group focus meeting that I did want to come. I'm curious what you mean by the term aggregated, and my comment is something like, a lot of the overhead is going from house to house.
Mhm.
And also waiting on the inspectors to show up. So if we could coordinate houses in a given area, like you said, like on one feeder line, that would enable installers to do more than one house in a day, and therefore cut the costs.
That's exactly what aggregation is, like more than one, right? You're getting a group of customers and then you're going into contract with them as a group. So, you're not doing one-off things. And so maybe there's a way Austin Energy can help to assemble those groups, and maybe then they go out to a competitive bid situation or something like that. This is thinking outside the box. It's not saying we're doing this,
Right.
right? But that kind of thing.
And also enabling the installations to happen in a similar period of time. Like, when all the paperwork done, so all of them can happen on a given day and not spread out across weeks.
Right. And so, there are seeds that can be planted, and I'll kind of harken back to what they did here in the Miller neighborhood. When this Miller neighborhood, which is the old airport, when they decided to develop here, the homeowners all got together as their homes are being constructed, new construction build mostly. They formed a coalition and came together, and they did a group purchase of solar. And so they went out basically for RFP and, got bids and then selected their contractors based on those bids where they were competing more on, because they had those that aggregation and scale. And so they got a lot better pricing because of that. And the Miller neighborhood right here is the most concentrated neighborhood of solar that we have in our service territory because of that. So, and they were also working with a research group that offered an additional incentive. So, it's like those kind of creative things that customers can do when they get together to bring value and, reduce their costs. And so that kind of same thing could work here because, it would reduce the developer's costs as well and help to get them in this price point.
Okay, can I ask one more follow-up?
Sure.
Clarifying question then. That sounds awesome, and a subdivision or a neighborhood could get together, makes a lot of sense. My hypothesis is that maybe the low-income houses aren't in that kind of organized structure yet. They could be, I don't know. But my point is that I think you had said before that it doesn't necessarily have to be on a low-income house in order for the low-income people to get the benefit of the 20%.
That's their solar for all. So
Okay.
I want to make sure that we're distinguishing between the two.
Yeah.
Solar for All is a very special grant funded program.
Right.
Okay, that's going to be, in a way different. And so, we will target those low income customers as hosts, and those hosts don't necessarily have to be the same ones that are getting the 20% discounts. Is probably what you heard.
Yeah.
So, you have, and it's kind of, in a way, that's the same. You have a host here that's hosting the residential standard offer. And they're getting a lease payment basically for the use of their roof. But then that generation is going into a community solar program through which another customer could subscribe to the renewable energy that's produced. So, thank you. So some other questions that came out of that: how will the community solar program be redesigned? What will the market rate premium be? Can this premium buy down or raise up the residential solar standard offer price point? So that's something that we're going to explore. If we have a product that customers are willing to pay a premium for, we collect that premium, and then we use that money that's collected to create benefit over on the other side, which can increase adoption. So that's the idea there. Austin Energy is a nonprofit. We remain cost neutral. And so, these are things that we're interested in trying to do. And then finally, where does Austin Energy and the contractor target demographics align? And so that one, our target demographics are anybody that wants to host solar. So you guys, it's more about y'all's target demographics, I would say. We're limited to our customers, but we want to enable any customer that's willing to participate. So, we could talk more about that, but, I would say that's, if you guys have target demographics, we want to hear about that more. And maybe then we can focus marketing efforts to optimize the program. But at the end of the day, we're looking to optimize solar adoption and battery adoption within our service territory. So now that we've given a lot of background information and communicated some of the progress that we've made, I want to start to open the door for discussion. I'll quickly go through these opportunities and challenges, and then we'll take questions. So if you've got topics that you want to talk about, or things that maybe we can answer today, then let's get those out on the table after this slide. So, for opportunities, what we see here is an opportunity to maximize solar deployment within the service territory, potentially a no-cost option with benefits to the solar host, potential to incorporate learnings from Solar for All here, resiliency, if we can figure out how to pair this with a battery program, and I think we can, potential ownership flip at the end of whatever period, the developer needs to soak out the benefits for them, and then maybe others. And challenges, financing is one of the challenges, battery inclusion, customer protection. And I think that's something that we want to definitely explore here and maybe at the next meeting to, what does consumer protection look like in this program? Is it education? Is it contractual, or is it like requirements from the participating contractors and or developers? Or, what other types of consumer protections can we imagine? Access and maintenance, billing, facilitating ownership flip, and recycling is another big one that I'd like to explore here, and then others. So with that, let's open up the floor and start some discussion. And I am ready for anybody to kick that off. We've got about 10 minutes.
Got some comments I can read to you if you'd like. George asks or states, if people get resiliency during grid events, they might be able to pay a premium either upfront or monthly. which will make this program have better financials?
Okay. So, I mean, I think that there's potential there. I think that some people are definitely willing to pay for that resilience. It has value. How much that is, we could probably leave that up to the developers to create their own offerings to determine what their price point is. And whether, there is some kind of upfront, or maybe it's just a wash for hosting the solar and the battery, or, you guys come up with your own cost models. Austin Energy is not going to do that for you. What we're doing is we lay out the playing field. We make it in a way that has consumer protections. We put for our best foot forward, as much avoided cost value as we are able to do. And then, once we set the table, it's up to you guys to figure out, what the main course and dessert is. So, that's kind of the role that we're going to play there.
Scott has a follow-up. Scott, did you want to unmute so you could ask versus me reading your comments?
Sure. First question was, again, back on the solar standard offer pricing slide. You could also update that total run rate 2026 trend, the final column to the right. Update that to include all 4 known years now that we know 2024, because 1124 in green is, of course, the 3-year average. And if you throw in the lower, whether it's 0.0661 or whether it's 0.0641, you're going to drop that 1124 down to the 4 known years.
Right. Yeah, I'll do that. And then we'll send out this updated presentation. Thanks for that input.
Okay. And, just as we're all looking at the economics, that really highlights the variable nature of this structure, that it's got a 5-year rolling average, but, the chickens come home to roost eventually. And if we've got this very low 6 cent for 2024 reference price in there, the price is no longer 11 cents. As we look into the future, it's lower than that. And that really puts pressure on third-party ownership trying to get everybody paid. And, it's 5-year average. That's what it is.
It is what it is.
Yep. And I had another
Sure. Go ahead, Scott.
comment in there, which is a challenge and opportunity. I've looked at the language of the property tax exemption for renewable energy assets. And there may be, if Austin Energy is able to connect behind the meter, there may be a way for us to have third-party ownership and have it exempt from property tax. The phrasing is that the energy must be primarily used by the building, but it does not say that the RECs have to be primarily used by the building. So with that concept, if the interconnection, instead of front of the meter, there's no question. It's not used by the building. It's going straight out to the pole. But behind the meter, with a dual meter, we might be able to say that the electrons are consumed by the building, but the RECs are consumed outside the building by the community solar subscribers. And in that way, improve the economics by making this qualify for no property tax for the third-party owner of the renewable energy equipment. It's just, I'm just tossing this idea of a structure out there that does require the connection point to be behind the meter. But given that, I think it's an area for further, discussion and study, whether or not that would enable us to reduce cost in a meaningful way, like 2% a year is the property tax rate of the asset value.
That's a good point, and we have some contacts. I think we could explore that with the authorities that implement that rule. So can take a note of that, Sam. We'll reach out and maybe we can come back to the next stakeholder meeting with that information.
Yeah, it would be a way without the money coming from the contractors or coming from Austin Energy. We have this other party, the taxing authority, which could jump in there and help make the economics work for deploying solar.
Good point. Kaiba?
Yeah, so I guess just kind of adding on to the whatever, articulating concern about the price going forward. I think that adding to the list of things to discuss, we should talk about potentially maybe using some money from the incentives bucket to, add the environmental benefits piece at least back in to the value. I think from the beginning, I've had concern that I think there's a real inequity in what's being paid out for the standard offer program versus what goes to behind the meter installations. Fundamentally, these installations are going to customers who can't afford, probably, be they residential or commercial, or, in one way are restricted from doing behind the meter, and the utility is giving significantly less financial support, both through not including the environmental benefits, and there's no, just actual incentive, which you would get for behind the meter. So even if it's not adding all of that back in, I think consideration of adding at least the environmental benefits piece and maybe paying for that from the EES fund should be something we discuss.
You got that, Sam?
Good. Two comments or questions, comments. Jonathan would like to know what's the timeline for adding BESS components, and George would like to know, would you consider, or you might consider tier pricing with zero cost for low income houses?
Okay, so low income housing, I'll address that first. Low income housing is the target of Solar for All, and that's for the next 4 years. So, we always want to keep a focus and an eye on low income housing, but we have a path that we're creating specifically for them through Solar for All. So I don't think that this is the place for that right now. And what was the other question?
The other one was,
BESS.
yeah, BESS.
Oh, for storage. Yeah, so we are about to, I think I can say this, we're about to release an RFP for battery storage and the study of that. And so once we get some information back from that study, then, we'll be poised to go further with batteries. But we really need to know, what the value of batteries is potentially to Austin Energy.
So are you saying if there is value, it would be in the standard offer program for residential?
For batteries,
Yeah.
I think what we would likely do is have a residential standard offer that is complementary and can work alongside a battery standard offer, but each of those could also stand alone. So it's one, the other, or both. Because we have a lot of customers out there that already have solar. And so they may want to adopt a battery. So we want that to be standalone. And
There's a lot of properties that can't do solar, but they all can do battery.
right. So it's good to have that kind of flexibility for them to be either autonomous or work together. Other questions?
You said the goal is to have the final version of the program in September.
Yeah, but it's not going to have the battery component.
Right.
But it could, but we do want to have it set up so that it can. So we definitely want to be thinking about that all along the way. But that is our goal.
And launch in January. Meaning
No.
accept applications in January.
No. In September, we would, decide whether we're taking it to the program level. Probably have another meeting or two after that, but it takes us a while to set up all of the systems internally to be able to do it. So we have to make billing program adjustments. We have to come up with documentation and forms and a platform to handle the program and things like that. All that development takes time. So it would probably be, 9 months to it, maybe even a year after that. So we're talking about launch and, potentially before the beginning of FY 27, which is October of 2026. So, yeah, a year and 3 months from now or so. Any other questions? Taylor?
I think you just said this is not necessarily the forum for talking about solar for all, but can you just comment a little bit about what the federal funding status is? I know that HARP just launched an RFP for solar for all, so I guess HARP has the money.
HARC does have the money. Well, HARC is the administrative branch of Harris County. And Harris County is the grant recipient, so they're the lead and we're subrecipients.
Right.
The money is there, we can access it. It is encumbered. So they like, any unencumbered grant funds are fully retractable through the budget process, the federal budget process. But encumbered grant funds are not. That said, they have to remain encumbered. So if, we have to stay within compliance of the grant at every step. If we make too big of a change, then they can say, oh, you want to change it too much? Well, now it's not encumbered and then it's at risk. So we need to keep it encumbered. And so that means, very careful steps.
Did HARC launch an RFI or an RFP? RFI?
RFP
For what?
for 180 homes in Waco and
So the wake up.
Harris County. Through Solar United Neighbors.
Their procurement processes are faster than ours, but we're working on it.
Right there.
My question was about the community solar pricing and wondering if maybe the next of these meetings could include the folks that are usually involved in that. I'm assuming there's people in finance, just wondering if we can start to make some progress on that discussion, or if it's happening right now behind the scenes.
Yeah, let's plan for that. I think maybe we'll have a separate community solar meeting for that purpose. But yeah, we'll get that on the books. I think that's appropriate to have in the next month or month and a half or so.
That sounds great. I think it was maybe at the last of these meetings, so maybe it wasn't the one about finance. I can't remember. We talked about having y'all doing a survey of.
That goes out at the end of this week.
Yay. What are you asking?
We're basically gauging customer interest in hosting solar, having resiliency for the batteries, different, what are their barriers, what might keep them from doing that? So we're trying to just tease out information from customers that have, how they would react to that type of an offering.
What about willingness to pay for a community solar offering? That seems like an important thing to ask. before.
Yeah, we don't have that in this one, but we can do surveys. We can do more surveys.
The two-way test.
So let's try to develop a survey in the community solar meeting. That can be part of the agenda.
Okay.
Got that? Okay. We'll try to have that sooner rather than later. I think within a month. we can do.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Do we have any more time?
I mean, it was over at 3.
Oh.
But yeah, shoot.
This concept of having, you know, the right houses on the right feeder lines has come up a few times in the year we've been talking about this. So if there's any data that you can provide that will help target areas that are most valuable.
We're not there yet, unfortunately. We can do hosting capacity analysis. When we do it, it's to identify whether a point of interconnection has the hosting capacity to enable a proposed project.
Mhm.
Now, the next level is to have all of it mapped out, right? And then that's a living map that gets updated over time as more DERs and load increases and everything else. So, you know, we're not there yet. I don't know when we're going to get there. We've been slowly moving in that direction for many years, but it's, you know, it's a big hill.
Is that different than the data of what substations are close to their load? It sounds like you hinted at that kind of data as a.
Hosting capacity what it does is it identifies constraints. And there are a lot of different constraints. You know, we're looking at everything from voltage to thermal, you know, power quality things for the most part. And so as such, it's very locational. So you may have 10 megawatts of hosting capacity at the substation, you know, near the substation on a feeder. But as you get towards the end of that feeder line, you have less and less hosting capacity. Unless there's something along the feeder line that increases that hosting capacity. So there are different devices that can be put in there to help with different things. So, you know, it really just depends on how the grid's all set up, what equipment you have where your loads are, where your DER resources are, how you're controlling those DER resources. You know, it's a big puzzly picture that you try to paint so that you could communicate, okay, here's and identify, this is where we need this stuff. And this is where this stuff's going to be a problem, you know, to interconnect. And we would need more infrastructure to be able to interconnect 3 megawatts at this location at the grid. So, you know, those kind of things are all part of the results of a higher level hosting capacity map. You can see some examples of that. I think NYSERDA has a good one that they publish. And if we could get to that point, you know, someday, then, you know, we start to then be able to better approach the ability to leverage non-wires alternatives. And that's what I was talking about, where you're managing the load on a feeder rather than through more generation and flexibility rather than building a new substation or a new feeder. Can we get there? Let's hope. We're working at it, you know. And there are other utilities that are a lot closer. So we'll role model after them.
I think the only other question I've got is people are asking how they can get the PowerPoint for this.
We're going to send out an updated PowerPoint later today or early tomorrow, let's say. Or not tomorrow. Tomorrow's a holiday.
Yeah.
Let's call it Friday. All right. All right, y'all. With that, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for your participation and all the questions. We will continue to make progress on this, and we'll set up the next meeting and get that invite out without too much delay.